right, well, it is 10:14, so let's get started. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. This has been something that's been a long time in the making, and I'm so grateful to Diane and to Jan for coming out here. I'm so sorry that Stacy couldn't make it. But I'm extremely grateful to our evaluation team for coming in and for taking the time to talk with everyone and to provide us with a good roadmap on where we can take the justice system, which I think is really important. So I understand that there might be some members of Congress who are coming, but I did want to state that they were all extended an invitation. So I'm extremely grateful for you being here today and for everyone who came today. And I wanted to specifically acknowledge our principal chief, Jeff Standing Bear, for coming and for the work that he's done in terms of supporting us and for helping us get this process going. And I also wanted to acknowledge Elizabeth Homer and Drew Pierce, who are two of our Associate Justices of the Supreme Court, and Judge Lee Stout, who is one of our Associate Judges of the Trial Court. So I'm grateful for all of you being here, and I would like to invite Chief Standing Bear to say a few words, and then we can get started. Okay.
Thank you, Chief Justice, Justices, Judge, and all the guests, Laura. It's a good time to remind ourselves of the importance of our courts. We are only 11 years old as a government at this time, and we're still learning how to function in a three-branch form of government. This court is an essential part of it, showing us the way on how we should do things. I'll give you an example of how important it is. One of my key staff last year came back from a seminar where Governor Bill Anatoly was speaking, and someone was able to ask, well, they were all able to ask questions, but the one question that struck my staff member as really important for our purposes is when a person said, Governor Anatoly of the Chickasaw Nation, what is the most important events, or what is the important, how should you say it, what was most important in building the success of the Chickasaw Nation? And my staff person, Debbie Atterbury, said, Chief, you know what he said of everything else? He said the most important thing in the success of building this Chickasaw Nation was respecting our Supreme Court and respecting our Supreme Court justices. Of everything he could have picked, he said that was the most important thing. Well, that's a lesson for Osage. We are 11 years into this three-branch form of government, and we've already learned a couple of times how the other two branches need to understand the role of our Supreme Court. Now, as an attorney, I have an advantage in that regard, but I head an executive branch with hundreds of people. So it's important that my job for my branch at this time, as long as I'm here, and my successors after me, find a way to educate our people in the way that Governor Anatoly was trying to educate the people at that seminar. How we do that, I'm not sure, because I've tried to hand out legal opinions of the court and tell everybody to read them. Well, people don't like to read long legal opinions as much as lawyers. I think one thing that we need to do, and where we're running short, is an educational outreach program where the court can explain to not just the leadership, but our employees and our boards and our commissions on what is the role of the court. And I think at this point, this is where we need to move. Now, we're going to talk about the necessity of funding. We're going to talk about the necessity of support personnel. We're going to talk about code building. We're going to talk about updating codes. But from my perspective, the most important thing for the executive branch is how to educate our boards, commissions, and our employees on what is the court in a three-branch government. So on that mission, I really want to dedicate my remaining time in this spot with our Supreme Court and our district courts. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us. We very much enjoyed our time here doing the assessment, the great hospitality, got fed very, very well. The assessment is, for those of you who don't know, this is an initiative of the Bureau of Indian Affairs Tribal Justice Services, which is a very tiny department within BIA. And its goal, its reason for being, is to support tribal judicial systems. They cannot fund directly those judicial systems without some sort of assessment of the needs of the court. And to do that, they hire outside contractors to go in and do the assessments. And that's what we are. We are the contractors to do that. I have two contracts, one tribal courts in Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. The other one is the CFR courts. We did most of those the first year, and then they've added some of the northern tribes to that contract because there's only 7 CFR courts. The assessment is a template, so we have to ask and try to get the information to fill in that template, and that's what you have in front of you. So one of the things, Chief, that the report addresses is separation of powers and independence of the court. And it wouldn't be in there, right, if it weren't important or hadn't been an issue in other courts. So that's one of the things that we look at. So Jan Tiger and I will sort of go over the summary of recommendations. We'll answer any questions that you might have, and we will talk to you about what you can do to try to get funding to meet some of your, we talk about unmet needs, right? So this process, initially when we go in, lots of times people think of it as an audit or what's my grade going to be, and it's not that at all, right? It's an assessment, looks at different functions of the court, and then tries to, Jan always tells people, you want to have unmet needs, right? You want to have, even if you wanted to call them deficiencies, because then that means you'll probably get funded for it. So let me go through some of these. This first one.
Can I back up really quick? So again, the assessment is not, we're not here to come to the court and say, you have this wrong, or the codes are terrible or anything like that. We're really here to just help you get funding to meet those unmet needs and to make sure that the report is done in a diplomatic way. So these reports are definitely owned by you, but they also are housed with the BIA. So anybody that wants to get this report, it's subject to the Open Records Act. And so we make sure to do this very diplomatic, and just so that it's for your best suited interest and to help you get the funds that you need for your court. Also, I know that it came up several times that sometimes the different courts want a bigger building, or they want to move and add different resources or new construction. This particular project, they do not allow for construction needs, but you can use a report for, say you're going to Congress or your national council or tribal council. You can use that report to say, even the assessment team says that we need a bigger court because we have security needs, or we need escape routes, or there's nowhere to meet with clients. Also, if you're seeking funding outside of your national council or Congress or whatever you call them, the tribal council, then you can use this report too, besides the funding sources that are in the back of your books. So in the back of your books, it tells you about different places that you can go for funding. And the one that we're particularly involved with is the Tribal Justice Support Directorate, and it's called TJS. That's the acronym that you'll hear us talk about a lot. It specifically names the stuff that you can get funded for, which includes travel, tuition, transportation, accommodations, per diem, training, which you'll see in our summary recommendations, office furniture, bailiffs. We've talked about that, and Diane will go over that. Security evaluations, court clerks, process servicers, alcohol monitoring programs, bench books, rules of procedure, and specifically, which most courts always ask for, is funding to revamp or revise or even establish new codes. And so when we are doing these summary of recommendations, we try to stay in tune with that so that it's easy for you to use your letter to send to back to TJS to ask for specific funding. We make it easy. You can reference the number, send the letter in, and the funding has been awarded pretty easily. Now, as we know, it's government, so sometimes it takes a little bit to actually drop down in your account, but we did try to make it real easy for you.
Okay, and one of the things, when you do that letter to TJS, you can say, you know, we have this unmet need, and then you can reference, see that measure over there, you know, in the summary recommendations under unmet need 1.2.1, whatever. We'll talk about the specifics maybe of how to do that at the end. So, Chief, this first recommendation, and we make this a lot, is for the court to establish some sort of, I don't know, community listening or some sort of forum to talk with tribal citizens, talk with other members of the government. This is the court, this is where we meet, this is what we do, this is what we don't do, right? Those sorts of things. And courts don't do that a lot. You know, I don't know that any court does that a lot, but I think it's important. I think your public knows about your court. It's a very, you have a very sophisticated court that's widely respected. We talk to members of the outside bar when we can. We were able to in this instance, and almost universally members of the outside bar say, I would much rather practice here than I would, you know, down the hill in state court, right? So you should be very proud of your system. A court clerk manual, I know that there's been some efforts underway for that, and I think that would be a good tool for you to have to be able to complete. Hand railing, one of those just physical infrastructure things they ask for us to look at as far as handicap accessibility. And then emergency procedures, court safety and security. You can see that's a big topic that they want us to look at. So training for court staff and judges. You know, we all don't want to think that anything would happen, but particularly, it's not so much the criminal cases as it is the domestic cases, the child support, the custody, the grandparent visitation can be so emotionally charged that court safety and security is a big deal for courts all across the country. So training for that, and then almost universally, of course, when we were talking to all stakeholders, a full-time bailiff, just so that you know, you can have somebody here all the time that's not subject to being called out on another call, right? You know, before court starts, and then after court's over, you know, after everybody leaves, make sure that everybody's out. So that full-time bailiff, we think is an unmet need for you all, and you did too. Metal detector, that's another thing that we've seen funded quite a bit. The walk-through metal detectors, and there's a formal name for those that I never can remember. I call them walk-through metal detectors. And or wands, you know, there are different ways to do that to make sure that people are not carrying weapons in. One thing in this modern age, one way to communicate with the public, of course, is through a website, and you have one, maybe updating that, linking pro se forms to that website, information, docket dates, contact numbers, just the information to the public that, you know, back in the old days we'd have had to go down to the court clerk's office to get. Now, you know, everybody, you know, wants to find it and click a button and look at it. So I think that's important to have an up-to-date website with the information for the public. Online tools to post enactments and publication of Osage laws and Osage court opinions. One thing that we heard from different folks was, I mean, you've got those great codified statute books, but, you know, when Congress passes a law, then how do the rest of people know about it, right? How do you get access to that? And there are different ways. I'm certainly not the person to tell you what the software systems are, or what systems would be that could do that, but I know that there are some. So that I think would be a need that would enhance your ability to function, and also be a tool. Although we're looking at court systems, a lot of these things would have carryover benefit for other departments, or, you know, law enforcement or ICW or other branches. You know, if you can click a button and find out what resolutions or statutes were passed yesterday, that's a benefit to your citizenry. The case management system, you know, those things, you're fortunate to have one. Some people are still using written logs, but keeping those up to date and making sure that they, whatever the system is, fits the needs of your court system and your stakeholders. That is another thing that's often funded is case management system, and of course you have to buy subscriptions, and some of those come with training, and you may have to pay for X amount of periodic training, but I know that that's one thing that TJS will fund, are those case management systems. So I'm going to turn the rest over to Jan to go over the high points.
So back to the case management system, I think that Meredith, you said that it really just needed an update, right?
Yes.
It needs lots of updates, and I know those updates are, can take, well actually are considerable amounts of money depending on the different updates that you get and the different types of reports. That's something that most of the tribes are liking right now, is that particular funding, because they can add more different links to their reporting systems and be able to get more reports and do different things with that particular system. Do you use Full Court?
Yes.
Okay. So Full Court has a report of action. It's kind of like a docket sheet, right?
Mhm.
There's all kinds of different functions, and you can pay for the different functions. So I wanted to make sure that we put that in there because I know Meredith had talked about that, and the court clerks have talked about making sure they had the updates because there wasn't funding for that previously. On number 10, we also talked to the staff, and there were some pending matters and some administrative things that need to be taken care of, but because the court meets regularly and there's lots of cases here, sometimes they don't always get taken care of right then because of the lack of staff. And so, as I said before, you know, this is what the funding is for, is to add employees if you need them. This particular employee can be used to scan in the different things that have been scanned in, or work in full court with the new functions and just make sure that everything's up to date. Sometimes I know that it looks like you have employees and they may be standing around or not doing something right at that time, and it seems like that maybe you don't need them, but that's not true. There's always going to be a little bit of downtime, and they're going to be needed for different reasons, and for court days or for filing or for getting things ready for their judges. And so that was one of the things that was talked about while we were here. Again, just because of how the report is done and how it's a template, it's noted again the type, again, that you need a bailiff. And so this is in the personnel section, but it was also in the court security, and I go back up to that. You know, I have a friend that was there in California when the former chairwoman came in and there was the shooting, and she actually lived through that. And she has some very emotional issues because of that, and she talks a lot in different conferences about security, and it may seem that you don't need it now, but it always is good for the people that are practicing there every day, just to know that it's there. Yes, they feel safe with the people, they feel safe with their clients, but it's always good to be proactive, and the funding's there. So that was one thing that we noted several times, I think, throughout the report, not just in the summary, is the need for a bailiff, both because you need someone there to show the people coming in that they're security, and then also for the well-being of the people practicing there, and then just to keep things in a general good order day-to-day during court. Moving on to number 12, policies and procedures and code development. It's another part of the template about having interpreters for the court. And so the interpreter, it could be someone who speaks Osage, it could be someone who speaks Muskogee Creek, Cherokee, Choctaw, whatever. You're having more Spanish-speaking defendants in the courtroom too. And so the BIA, they really just wanted to make sure that the courts have a means of hiring interpreters and having access to interpreters, because we don't always think about that, you know, in our day-to-day decisions and going to court. And we may think of an interpreter as, oh, we need an interpreter for Osage, the Osage language, because that's who we are, and you know, it's a part of sovereignty, and we'd like people to speak Osage, but really you're getting more and more people that come in, and sometimes they can speak English, but they refuse to. So you want to just make sure that you have some type of policy or some way to call an interpreter should you need that. And there's funding to get that set up in your court rules or procedures.
Ma'am, I don't mean to interrupt, but about hearing impaired, because that's where I found the biggest difficulty in finding someone to come be an interpreter for hearing impaired folks.
Oops. Oh, I said it.
Do we say?
There you go. Yes, that's good to know.
Hearing impaired, chief.
Okay.
Say it or don't say it.
Please put that on the record, yeah. So and this is a big one. This is what all courts like for us to put in the report, and I think that every court could use it too, is that updating your current codes. I think that always, every code needs to be updated at some point. There's ever evolving and changes to the laws, changes to federal laws and state laws too, and you want to make sure that you're protected and you're protecting your own sovereignty. And so you need to, or we'd like for you to consider changing some of those things, making them up to date. Also fully implementing the Tribal Law and Order Act and the Violence Against Women Act, making sure that those are in there. Also to make sure when you are doing that, that your code addresses jury provisions, because that's part of VAWA, so you'll need to make sure that that's in there to implement. You have to implement both. And so you might note that. I'm not sure if we noted that in the report, but.
I did.
Okay.
Specifically, we have to expand our jury pool to include a cross-section of the community if we're going to assert jurisdiction over non-Indian offenders under
Okay.
VAWA.
So we all do different parts of the code, and so sometimes that may not have been my part, so I'm not sure what every part is, and it still all meshes together though. And then last, technical assistance, judges and court clerks, or whoever that's working there, administrative assistants, whoever you think, they should always continue judicial and court clerk training. Everybody likes training, and there's always new things that come up. We went ahead and did a couple of measures there so that you could specifically reference that for your ask for your funding. I know that one of the tribes that we worked with, they went ahead and put in sovereignty, FBAR, the National Judicial College, and then I think they put in Falmouth. So they put in about 5 trainings, and they put in about 5 employees, and they got funded on all of those. And so we did note that for your report. If you go to your,
Actually, Dawn, you skipped over social media.
oh, did I?
Yeah.
Oh, social media, right there. So, number 14, the court should consider establishing its own social media policies that are separate from the administration. And the reason that we put that in there and why it's part of the template is that some of the other tribes, they don't match. They have specific social media policies just for the judicial branch, because sometimes they have to be outlined for employees. Employees sometimes, they just maybe new, they don't understand how important the confidentiality of the court is, or even, saying that, for instance, I'm working late tonight, my judges are working on an opinion, or I'm here late doing this, I'm researching, whatever, because that alerts people within the community that the Supreme Court is getting ready to issue an opinion, or they're all there at the courthouse, and that could also raise a security issue. And so that's very important, not only for security, but for the confidentiality, and just for the needs of the court, that the court has its own social media policies, and that their employees know what that means, and how to handle your Facebook, how to handle even the media calling. And so if the Tulsa World calls regarding something that involves the tribe, then normally, of course, it would be sent over to the administration, and I'm sure that there's a PR person or somebody designated to that, and they can speak on that. But if it involves the court, especially an opinion, maybe there's something that is everybody wants to know in the community how that opinion is going to turn out when it's going to be issued. You want to make sure that your employees know that that doesn't go to the executive branch or the legislative branch, that it goes to the Chief Justice or whoever is designated within the judicial system. So we've ran across that a couple different times in the training. They talked about it being a little bit more separate, just like Mr. or Chief Sandimer talked about the separate branches of government and how it's important to note that in any tribal government. So in your book, I think you guys probably got several of these, and if not, we can always make more copies and send them. in the beginning, there's a lot of different short summaries to specific things like access to justice, expedition and timeliness, equality, fairness, and integrity. And so you will find things in there that are things that we noted that were very positive to the court. And then you will find things that, again, we noted so that you could take our recommendation if you like and try to implement those particular suggestions. And then, of course, use those for asking for your funding. Overall, I think that, as Diane said, we had a really good time here. We learned a lot about your tribal government and your codes, and some of your codes we want to use and suggest to other tribes. And others, of course, every tribe could use a little bit of help in getting those just updated. Just kind of like any policy procedure, everything needs to be updated. And other than that, it's been a very good, positive project for us. And so that's all that I really have. Diane, do you have anything, and do you have questions or anything that you want us to further explain regarding the report?
Chief?
I'm wondering about the role of the Bar Association or funding for a Bar Association, and where that comes from is even before I was in this position, I noticed over in the legislature, we would be writing legislation and codes with little or no input from our court. And when I recalled how it's done in our state system or even our federal system, the bar associations have tremendous influence because they do the work, the committees of the bar. Here at Osage, not unlike a lot of medium-sized or small tribes, we don't have a system where we have a bar association, there's committees that says, okay, all domestic violence laws and related criminal codes, you guys need to look at that, or whatever. So I think part of that is that the attorneys that practice in tribal courts normally are very busy. Very few of the big firms, I guess big firms, except I think look at them as corporations, and they seem to have more time on their hands. I've noticed those attorneys, at least those that I've met over the last few decades. But most of us that go into tribal courts are working and going from one court to the other all the time. We don't have time to sit down and to organize the bar, organize the meetings. We'll all take time to sit down and talk, but we don't have the capability for funding staff. And I'm just wondering if you all have run into that issue with other tribes, because what's happened here is it continues. The codes are being written by legislators, and often with no input from my office.
Or the court.
Or the court.
Yeah, or the court, and they become, people get ownership of them, and then they get territorial about them. So by the time I get to come in, or I can't speak for the court, but at least the time I get to come into the situation, it becomes, oh, you're coming into our territory. And even though I get to have a say-so on signing or veto, I'd like to see these written in a rational way, where we define the need, and then we look for the best practices, and then we make it uniquely Osage.
Right.
Okay, we don't have that.
I don't know, Chief, if anyone does. I know when I was at Cherokee Nation, it was the same thing, right? The judiciary would often not know about statutes that were passed affecting them until the members of the public did, or they read about it in the newspaper. And I was in the executive branch, I was the Attorney General, and oftentimes we wouldn't either. So I fully understand the situation. I don't know what the answer is, but I do know TJS, one of the things they fund are consultants, right? So we've seen definitely consultants funded to assist with code development. I don't know why you couldn't be a little more creative with that and ask for some funding to establish, I don't know, a liaison committee or something between the bar and the judiciary and Congress and the executive. Why not? I mean, why not ask? You know, envision it and,
Well, I think too, on the recommendations, and one of the things that we talked about in one of the last trainings too is establishing the rapport with your community and with other departments. And we noted on the first recommendation that as activity is having that annual meeting and meeting with representatives of stakeholders. And so I think that you could probably tie that in on one of those measures to the TJS funding, because there is something in there for obviously consulting services, code development, and then other qualifying items. So I think you could probably tie those all together and see if you could get something funded, including a meeting space and, you know, time with the bar to get some stuff for Osage.
Do you know how, I don't know if anybody knows how these ends of the court are funded, these federal ends of the court?
I don't.
Which is sort of like a, you know, mini bar associations.
Right.
Something-
Some, you know, like FBAR is a very powerful, the Federal Bar Association is a very powerful entity that holds that annual meeting. I don't know.
Chief, I was gonna ask, and I think one thing that might be helpful, and I don't know if we do this already, is to have an annual date for new statutes and not just, they pass it, it takes effect. So, unless it's an emergency, of course it would need to. But if we had a,
It's an emergency
Every
here.
statute.
yeah, well, but it just seems, because that way it would give us a chance to, oh, this is coming effective November 1 or whatever date you want to set, so that we're ready for it and not just, oh, I don't even know what you're talking about, because that's what happens.
Right.
Oh, we'll have to go look that up, you know, and see, because I have no idea. So, but that was just a suggestion that I thought might be helpful.
I would support something like that. I hope the legislature would be here to hear
You know,
this.
Oklahoma does that the November 1st.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be November 1st, I mean, just to pick some date that's important or can be useful, and we all know every October 1st, November 1st, we gotta make sure we check for the new statutes.
Here at Osage, probably unlike, not unlike others, we will get legislation as it comes in. We monitor as much as we can. And then at the last moment, amendments are made on the floor that completely changes the legislation. And it comes to my desk, and the last one that came across of the Health Authority Board, I said shock, because it was nothing like what I had agreed on. But I signed it because I'm trying to keep peace. So we need some better understanding between the branches of how this lawmaking really should work. I'll just say it, that's what I think.
And I, practicing in all the local tribal courts myself as well, the Osage Nation is way beyond, I mean, you guys are so far ahead of everyone else, and I am so thankful to come over here and have a book I can actually look at.
Wow, where have you been working?
So, well, trust me, sometimes I have to go to the court clerk and say, do we even have a code for this? And, well, somewhere, you know, and so we are really doing well compared to the other tribes around us, and I'm
Well, that's
really
good.
proud of those
Just that's good.
situations.
I think one of the comments that I noted in here was this discussion about maintaining independence. And I think one of the things that we struggle with is how do we collaborate with each other, with the other branches, without it looking like we are
Not independent.
not independent, yeah, because, I mean, our office coordinates with the principal chief's office a lot because we have to. We have collaboration. Most of the administrative.
Because you have to?
Yeah, you run,
Okay,
you're in charge of human resources, our payroll,
I was
IT,
teasing.
see? It's all- So anyway, but anyway, it's because those things are under the executive, so it benefits everyone to collaborate in this way. We collaborate about,
Well, let's talk about the police, for example.
Yeah.
The bailiff. I get my police chief coming in and saying, hey, I can't afford this, you put it in the budget to have a bailiff, and, you know, shouldn't they have that funding be out of their office? Well, you know, I don't know. I mean,
Should.
good question.
yeah,
But
It should be here.
that's something, well, it should be here. right? Well, that's something we could work together on, and I could support to the legislature. that we fully support it because it needs to be done. It's security. It's different than building security. That's part of the education process.
Yeah, and I wanted to try to get some ideas on how can we invite this collaboration and continue it without it affecting the perception of our independence. And so that's something that I think every tribal government that's multiple branches struggles with.
I think so too.
But particularly for us, we can't do what we do without the other two branches. I mean, that's kind of the bottom line. And to make this a collaborative effort, I think really requires all parties to be involved. So that issue with, meeting with stakeholders and I think trying to collaborate more with each other is just in the nation's best interest. So what would you recommend? Because I obviously don't want to give the impression that, even though I'm sitting next to him right now, is that we are somehow in cahoots with the executive branch, but we have a partnership and we have collaboration and to the extent that's perceived as something different, how do you dispel that?
I guess the short answer is I don't know, and every tribal government that I know struggles with that. On the flip side, you do have 3 branches of government, and some tribes don't have that. So, wow, if you have one business committee or one body that's trying to do all 3 functions, that I think is not a good situation. So, with the good of having the separate branches comes this built-in tension about how you work together.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I mean, you know the answer. Communication and collaboration is the key, and you just have to find the personnel within those branches to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about Cherokee because I was there so long. One of the things that we did, I was in the executive, was the attorney for the council and I worked together a lot. And in fact, we worked together so much, it irritated the chief sometime. Why do you talk to that guy? I can't stand, whatever. And I'd say, because I have to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So finding the right personnel that can cross those and build those bridges and those liaisons is really
Well, let me
an
suggest.
art more than a science,
Let
probably.
me suggest something I learned from experience here. When Chief Justice approached Assistant Chief Whitehorn and I about a Judicial Forum, which would provide the Congress or legislature and my staff leadership informal talk with the board more on a philosophical basis. That's a start, and we
Sure.
haven't done that yet. But the more I thought about that, we still need to do that. I'm concerned about the lack of buy-in from the entire relatively small system we have here. And we need our legislature to fully participate in this process and everything we're doing here. So that's where I started looking at my own employees and directors and realized they just don't understand how this really works. And one way to put pressure, probably the best way to put pressure on any elected leader, is to have their constituents well informed and have them start telling the elected leadership, you need to be doing this. That's where I come into this education of all 500 of the executive branch employees. And at a level they can understand, knowing that some of them have a high school education. Well, heck, some of our legislators have only a high school education and have only worked for the tribe in the past. Knowing that communication has to get to them is a challenge that I think we need to address in order to get all the 12 of our elected positions in the legislature, chief and assistant chief over here, fully engaged. So yes, we do need to do a forum with the Congress and the chief, but I think as important, we need to get some charts or graphs or something to say, okay, this is how this works. We want you all, as many as can be there, at some, like the Constantine Theater or something, so they can learn about their government.
Right.
And we're not doing that.
Right.
We're assuming everybody's going to get it, and I can assure you they're not.
Right.
Even some legislators haven't even read some of the court opinions, I found that out.
Well, can I just kind of add on to what the chief is saying? Because I came in last night, I had dinner with friends and family, and one of the things that was said in this discussion was, you know, that Maria Whitehorn had gotten into trouble up in Pawhuska, and your court had to deal with it. And I was like, Maria Whitehorn did not get into trouble. Okay, first of all, let me clarify, Maria Whitehorn did not get into trouble. That there was a dispute over these principles of separation of powers. And that drove home to me how little people are understanding our government, the role of the court, what our opinions are, what comes before the court. And you can see why particular individuals might become defensive because there's this perception. And it's an incorrect one. So I couldn't agree more that we need some kind of an educational process. And it occurs to me that we have one built in, which is our Osage Sovereignty Days in March. And, you know, why couldn't we have like an open house at the court, some kind of forum, maybe involve some kids, you know, and have moot court.
Poster day,
Anything like that. But also, you know, make it open to the public to, you know, to explain more. I know that the courthouse in Fairfax County, Virginia, they have all kinds of cool little brochures. You know, they have things for kids, you know, like this is our courthouse and that kind of stuff. You know, and I don't believe we have stuff like that. You know, just like really simple materials that are easy for people, you know, to understand and, you know, and age appropriate from the littlest people that the court deals with to, you know, to our elders.
We're not going to get that funding until the constituents put the pressure on elected leaders to divert our resources into what I think needs to be done. I think you could agree needs to be done. We have to have buy-in from our funding source, which is our legislature. And that's not going to happen. I'll give you an example. When I first, 3 years ago, I was asked to join tribal leaders to meet Sonia Sotomayor and Justice Cogger and other Supreme Court justices down there in Bidens. And so I thought, what a deal. And they made it real convenient for us. Right time, they checked with everybody's schedules, all 39 tribal leaders. I show up and only 16 show up, okay? Now, one reason that's important is Justice Sotomayor did what you proposed. She didn't talk about any case-specific matter. She didn't talk about any dispute. She wanted to deliver a message when she asked the Supreme Court of Oklahoma to leave the room. I want to talk to the tribal leaders, only 16 of us. She said, I want to tell you all that my colleagues do not look at the powers of Indian tribes being derived from treaty. They look at it as being flowing from the powers of the U.S. Congress. And of course, you know, the tribal leaders go, what's that mean? And she spent that 30 minutes explaining to the tribal leaders, what does that mean? Inherent tribal sovereignty? Her colleagues, a majority, don't believe in it. They believe it all comes from the U.S. Congress, which means all of our powers, everything can be changed like that. And some of our tribal leaders were just stunned. Now that's an important message. And but in order to get that message out to our tribal leaders, we should have made it mandatory attendance. So if you're going to be delivering these important messages, I think, on my end, I need to make it mandatory attendance. Because if we just do an open house, they're not going to show up. That's just how it is. So I just think we have to make all of us, I can always learn something anywhere, but make everybody get educated quickly.
I think TJS too might fund some of that, some of those, you know, because we talk about community sessions and information.
I know they fund brochures for sure.
Okay.
And going back to statistics, so we saw this yesterday at Seminole, we've seen this at another tribe too, is that the court does some type of report and it has statistics. How many civil cases, how many criminal cases, how many divorces, how many juvenile cases per year, for the last 5 years. You know, the Treasurer is doing a new wellness court, you know, there's children's courts, there's truancy courts, and they do a report to the Congress and lets them know this is why the court is important to you and to the constituents, because we are helping the community. We're doing this for your kids, your grandchildren, yourself, your brothers and sisters. These are all the different things that we are handling and why we need funding, and just really goes to educate them of the things that you can do as a court. And then I talked to a council member after we looked at that report, and he said that he really appreciated those briefings, because when his constituents would come to him, he would say, well, have you went to the court? Do you know that we have this? And they did have some brochures. And he said that if you looked at this brochure, and he said that he wouldn't have known about that if it hadn't been the reports that he gets every day, or not every day, every quarter, every quarter. So that's something you might want to think about, is for the buy-in, if the council and, you know, the executive branch, whoever, if they have that knowledge of what's going in every day and how important it is of the court, and not to undermine the court because of the functions that it does for the nation.
Is there any funding for example, one of the issues that's before my legislature now, our legislature, is changing the way judges are selected to, I'm not giving anything away, because it's been stated publicly in Southern California to the Osages there by some members of our legislature to change the way our judges are selected. So what I'm thinking is, without taking any positions on that for anywhere, can we just get some neutral material that says, here is the advantages of elected positions versus appointed positions versus the appointed retention system, which we have now, to show people in an objective manner what options are available, because it's going to be important, I believe, in a few months when the legislature comes into session again. These issues come up. We know they're coming. We know they're there. Those are big issues that can be distracting. And I want to get everybody educated before then. So if you all know of anything that shows us, you know, what we have, then everybody can then go into their corners and say, okay, I want to be an advocate for this, I want to be an advocate for that, but I'd like a starting point, an objective view.
Well, it's in the, like I said, if you go back to the back of the book with the different funding sources, and the TJS, it says for code development and consultation. So I think that you could use either one of those, because it's going to be part of your codes, right? And then the consultation would be someone to do the different studies and do the research to see or provide the objectives to once then be codified. So then you could just probably, you know, use one of the code development measure numbers and then ask for that. And then it would be up to the governing body how to allocate those and for what reason.
What are the timetables on these grants? I know you, at the end you had several funding sources. Each one had different timetables? Is that
Probably. What we know about most is TJS, and it is just a letter format that goes to Tricia Tingle at TJS, and we're happy to provide that to you, to whomever, right? So it's a letter format that says, we've had an assessment, here are some of our unmet needs. It is one of the simplest funding requests I've ever seen, because literally that's what it is. It's a letter, and then, for example, we had some courts that needed computer equipment, and they just, you know, copied a couple ads off the internet and put that on the back. You know, here's how much it cost, right? Here's our RFQ for a position. Here's our statement of work for a consultant. And put the exhibits, and then they get funded. It really, now, how long it takes the money to drop is the long time. But I've seen the decision made within a week, 10 days.
Well, my question to the court would be, who writes your grants? I mean,
This last round, when the evaluation came out, we submitted 2 requests.
Well, y'all and I were talking about that. Did
one
you
was
get
funded. Yeah,
Okay.
one was funded, which was good.
Okay.
The other one, I think, was the ball funding, which we haven't heard anything about.
does our grants department write those for you?
They didn't this time, but future grant requests will go through the grants
And
department.
then you could tell them what you need.
Yeah, I'm meeting with
That's
Candy
great.
this afternoon, and we're gonna try to.
We'll
sort
check
that
on
out.
the VAWA.
Grants.
Oh, she's self-governance.
Yes, so you could talk to Chris.
Chris, oh, yeah, so we've been sending all our stuff to Chris as well.
Okay, so you can, okay, that's good. I just want to make sure we get the resources.
Yeah, we'll send the template to whomever, and
Okay.
we're happy to work with you however, and we'll check on that VAWA. Is that Fred, Alfred, or Brent?
Yes.
Well, she
We'll
needs
check
to
on
go
that
to the
with
chief justice or whoever she designates, but I was just making sure our system can come in a supporting role, not getting into separation of powers, just technical assistance like we do HR, like we do IT, or anything like that. Okay, I'm gonna make sure we get this moving. So once we've seen all the needs, we need to fix it,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
I've already called my staff, by the way, but I texted them about the hand railing, and they said, Roger that.
There you go. Easy fix.
Well, just, you know what we need to do.
Sure.
Well, it is part of the template, but, I mean, you know, for instance, my mom has to have hand railing, and, you know, it's, our family members need those things to get into the buildings, and you don't realize it until you actually need it, or one of your loved ones needs that, it's important. Once you fall down, especially at a certain age, it's, you know, hard to recover, especially hip injuries, I know for a fact.
We should have written here the automatic doors that open. So
Right.
you can roll
Maybe.
in.
Maybe.
Go ahead, go ahead.
I was just going to say, any other questions or issues? And we're not shutting the door, right? We'll still keep in contact with you, and we like to know, just because it gives us warm fuzzy feelings, right? If you get funded, what you get funded for, and if we can assist with, you know, send it to this person or copy this person, or here's a copy of the template, we're happy to do that. We really, Chief, you haven't heard my pitch, but I really mean this. Everybody on the team that does these assessments is native. Most of us are native lawyers. And we really fully believe that improving one tribe's court system helps us all, right? What helps one of us helps us all. Because it is a big fight. If some of those 9 up there in those black robes don't understand inherent sovereignty, that's a fight for all of us. So anything our little team can do to help tribal judiciaries is near and dear to our heart. We mean that. Sir?
I noticed that in some of the data in your report, between 2012 and 2016, the number of cases in the Osage Nation District Court increased from 122 cases in 2012 to 303 cases in 2016. Over the same period, the base funding decreased from 117,000 to 101,000.
That's something that members of the public could understand, right?
Yes.
Caseload's tripled and your funding
It's
is...
something that's been communicated, trust me. Yeah, we've always made a point of communicating how our caseload continues to rise, but somehow our funding continues to fall. Yeah.
My question was, is there something behind those numbers that was reduced as the base level because other programs were put in place for requests for additional funding to make up the difference? Is that something?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. We obtained those statistics from your court, so I don't know the rationale behind
It's
the
based on,
funding.
it's based on the amount that self-governance tells us, that's part of our total self-governance allocation. So they advise us what the court's allocation is, and that's the number that we plug in.
And when there's a shortfall, then usually the tribal government will step in and make up for that
Keyword
shortfall.
usually.
And then but sometimes if they don't, then, you know, you use this report and you use, like I was saying, the updates to the case management software to show the statistics and show that, you know, the cases are rising, that the funding is falling. And that's another reason I have these reports, just to show it. Sometimes people have to see that with their own eyes as opposed to being told. I'm one of those people, I have to see things. You can tell me something a couple times, and once I see it, then I really take that in. Another thing real quick, I'll just say that we'll be back to, it's in our contract that we come back within the year or about a year, just to see that everything is progressing and to see if there's anything else we can help you with. The funding is one-time funding, as you'll see in the back, for that particular program that we're associated with. The other funding opportunities are all different, but we also have the opportunity, and you have the opportunity to sometimes build the money into your 638 contracts. And of course, you work with Cherokee Tingle on that, but they also work with that, so it's not just a one-time funding, you can keep asking. That's something you work out with them, though, after this process is over.
Okay, what about the all-important issues that come from the non-court stuff? Or is it a court matter of incarceration and alternatives? Judge said, okay, you're gonna go to jail for 30 days, and, we go over there into the court and to the county jail, look at, wow, we can't afford that.
$42 a day, is that what you
Yeah.
pay? Something
Yeah,
like that?
and so I'm sure, I can't say, but I'm sure that kind of thinking goes into the judge's minds when they say, well, what's the point of sending somebody in for 30 days and they're only going to be there for 3 days?
Right.
I have no idea if that's what the judges think, but I just think that affects the disposition of justice of what remedies are available for the community and for the individual. I mean, if you, however you want to look at those kind of issues. What funding would be available, or is that way outside the scope of this group?
For incarceration? Or
Incarceration
detention, or
alternatives,
detention. It
community
is outside of
service.
this. We've seen tribes that have their own. The Mountain Ute tribe has a juvenile detention facility, an adult detention facility, and a treatment facility, all in their little community. And I have no idea how they got that funding, but why not ask, right?
Office of Justice Programs used to provide funding for development of these kinds of facilities. I don't know if the funding is available right now, but, Justice Department did have funding for this for a number of years.
What about
Community
CTAS?
service.
What about CTAS? This,
Maybe CTAS.
okay,
Um,
that's the big coordinator.
That's a problem. Detention
Assistance
is a
solicitation.
problem widespread across Indian country. Some judiciaries get pretty creative. We'll let you work off your fines doing community service. Here's the guy over at administration you need to talk to, right? Work off your days in jail. You can give us 30 days of community service raking leaves instead of 30 days in jail.
Okay.
Tribes get creative
Chief
with.
Justice just showed me something on CSTAS. I think what we can do is just start scanning now our grants department, start as a starting point. I don't know, how do those things usually work though with the courts? So it's community service programs, and so I don't know how.
We don't have probation. I mean, there are a lot of issues, a lot of big issues with respect to criminal justice in the Osage Nation.
Yeah, we don't have.
That we don't have the infrastructure for it. Even to some of these alternative sentences, we don't have anyone to supervise that or monitor
Right. So
that.
part of
We
that.
don't have.
Sentencing is a measure in there. That might be something that you look at, right? Trying to get funding for.
Well, Chief, I know, as far as sentencing guidelines, I'm very cognizant of the cost of somebody in jail. So like on a contempt, if they're going in jail on a child support and they owe $15,000 in child support, we'll set a purge amount that's doable, like $1,000. Because grandma can come up with $1,000 to get him out of jail. So he gets a little jail time, we get a little money, and we're
So
not.
you adjust to reality.
Yes, I try to be real about that.
I'm just thinking, doesn't that kind of hamstring you a bit, that you only list so many options though? I mean,
Well, it does, but again, we try to work within the parameters of what money we have to, I'm not gonna try to bankrupt
Yes,
whoever pays,
yeah, I get
pays
it.
incarceration fees, so we try to adjust.
But what happens on your end when I hear it? They say, that guy owed me $30,000 worth
Sure.
of money, and now he's gonna walk after $3,000,
Yeah.
and it's my fault somehow, because I'm cheating.
Yeah, it always is, yeah.
There you go. Somebody's got to take the blame.
Thanks, Obama, or thanks,
I just want more broader options for you. And,
Mhm.
but there's a lack of knowledge. I mean, I've been in the legal system for so long, I took it for granted that, the court would send to community service. I just go down to an office and say, here, this is my.
Yeah, we don't have a community service
And
coordinator,
and I
so.
walk away. I just figured somebody's taking care of it.
That and fines and restitution is an issue as well, and it's hard to keep on top of that. And the only mechanism I know I have is just to require them to come back and see me every month, and I'll see how you're doing, because that's the only hammer I have. And then, and of course, if they're delinquent several times, then okay, sorry, you're going to go to jail.
But on the
And
child,
we run into the trouble of having debtors' prisons, which
Right.
is,
Yeah,
one of
that's
the
always
things
an
that we
issue.
try to avoid.
Well, you're so much better than the state of Oklahoma, though.
Yeah.
Yes.
So much better.
Yeah.
a lot of times we assess the incarceration costs against individuals, so he still owes $30,000 in child support, but now he's got $4,500 in court costs to pay his incarceration fees, so we're making his costs.
Exactly,
Go
it's just
But we do assess it, I don't think we've ever collected it, but. we do
I just
assess it.
haven't seen in Osage Nation, or really, most tribes, people really addressing the real issues.
Mhm.
Yes, ma'am.
If I may, I'm the legal assistant for the Child Support Office, and there's been new federal rules issued in regards to contempt actions in child support. So if someone's upset, he owes me $30,000, but he got out for paying $3,000. The new push from the federal regulations regarding child support is to address contempt, civil contempt, and debt holistically. Does the person have the ability to pay? Do they have drug and alcohol issues? Are they able to sustain and keep a job? Or is their order right-sized in accordance to how many different child support cases they have? And so the thought process is to give the person who is in contempt the keys of the jail. And that's all the new training that's coming down for civil contempt, is to give the person that is in contempt the keys to get out of jail and set a purge amount in accordance with their ability to pay.
That's well said. Let me suggest this. We're a small tribe, and one thing I've noticed around here is everybody says, okay, I'm gonna do my best in my area, but I'm afraid to get into other people's areas. Okay, I get that, and it causes problems when people do. But I was talking to somebody over in the health clinic this morning about how this person, talented person, wants to build a mental health system within our system, and how do we do that? Well, we're not getting a lot of response from the health system, but we can, as the entity itself, with our different programs, like our task program, which is related to the Indian Health Service program, I encourage that person to begin, like I said, back channeling. So I think what the way you said that, and you know the problem, Jeff knows the problem, the judge knows the problem. I see it, I hear about it, where I sit down. I don't see it, but I hear about it. We need to address the remedy situation. What's the whole point of all of what we're doing if we don't have a meaningful remedy for the victims and for the violator, for the court, to provide justice, right? We're not tackling that. And see, I think we have to break out of our job descriptions a little bit and start talking to each other. That's where I think Osage needs to go. We're too locked in often.
Locked in our silo.
Yeah, exactly,
Well,
yeah.
Can I, when I was working at the Department of Justice, and this was like a long time ago, 20 years ago, so I'm not bringing any modern information, but one of the programs that, I worked on to develop was an interdisciplinary team that, that would involve, that mental health community, the courts, the probation, the jails, to juvenile justice.
That's actually the trend, is to do these MDTs, these multidisciplinary teams.
Right.
That's the trend. I mean, that's becoming the standard practice.
Well, that sounds good.
And I don't see why we could not do that here, on our own, as kind of on a task force basis, to get a global look at what kind of infrastructure do we need so that we could actually, do some very targeted fundraising, look for different sources at the Justice Department and at BIA and other places, to address this. One of the program name was Tribal Strategies Against Violence, because that was the issue we were looking at that time, is reducing violence in tribal communities. But it could be for any issue, right? With violence, juvenile justice, or maybe we need something in you know, a number of different areas. But until we all sit down and bring our collective wisdom together, you know, we don't know. We just know our little
Well,
piece
I
of
like
it.
that. That way we can get mental health people, a member of the health board, to record from our programs, and get them all together.
I agree, we've got the expertise, we just don't talk to each
I
other.
like the
You may not know,
interdisciplinary team.
you may not know,
Right.
some mental health program could be great for some of your vendors.
Yeah, that would be, I would
wouldn't
love
know.
to have that availability.
We call it a task
To
force.
get recommendations to say, okay, what
Call
does
it a
this
task
family
force,
need?
Sure.
multidisciplinary team.
I like the multidisciplinary team, because around here, the word task force, people get like, oh, okay, what kind of authority?
Oh, another
do you got?
task force.
Yeah, and MDTs typically were used
Okay, I'll
in,
volunteer to start that process and circulate
so.
the idea.
Yay.
Okay.
Next order of
Yeah,
business.
I know. Oh my God.
Okay, stop, one victory. Okay, move on to the next one.
Okay.
That's actually, that was the model that was used in child welfare cases, because it
See, I
was,
I wouldn't have thought of that. I mean, I'll think, well, of course, he's talking to me for interdisciplinary task force, of course. Well, I didn't know that, but I know the problem.
this is
so
why
it's
we need to get together.
Yeah.
And you might want to reference it, because we don't put everything in the back, because there's only, like I said, it's a template. We put as many things as we can. But if you go back to the peacemaking and then just ways to deal with conflicts, and it just says, it's a vague, there's a bunch of different things in there. It's 3.3.3, and you could reference infrastructure and that other one, 3.3.3, and maybe with your team, then you can have a consultant to that team to actually do the work for you.
That would be so
So you
great.
guys can have your
That-
ideas, and, because, you know, everybody that's on that team has, you know, jobs that they have to do, and although they're all valuable to the team, it's hard for sometimes someone to go out to do the rest of the work, and so that would be something to ask for in your request, is a consultant to that team. And just make sure you ask for as much things as you can. I mean, it may not all get funded, but the more you ask for, then the more that's gonna get funded, as opposed to not asking. And so that's a great idea. That's something that we can take with us to our other assessments is,
No, you don't. We want to funding. We don't want to share funding.
We, I'm sorry to say, are gonna have to hit the road in about 10 or 15 minutes.
I have one question.
Sure.
It's about the jury issue, because this is,
Right.
when I did our VAWA submission for VAWA funding, I put in all the things that we already had in place. The big
Okay.
one was the jury pool. How have other tribes expanded their jury pool? Because I know that, I think like Gila River, Tohono I think there's a few other tribes that are doing expanded jurisdiction. So how did they expand their jury pool?
Tribal employees, right?
Okay.
You've got tribal employees who aren't Osage.
Right.
And you've got tribal employees who aren't native.
At the casinos.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
casino citizenry, casino patrons. Those are the two that I remember off the top of my head. Do you remember any other?
Patrons too?
Yes.
You want a free-
Really?
Right, yeah, sign up, if you want to be, if you want to
People
serve
actually want
on
to
stage,
jurors.
sign up here.
We have free play?
Hey. Thank you for your friend.
Yeah, include the summons on the rewards card. She'll also be a juror.
yeah, they actually had volunteer signups at different festivals or different things that they had, and they actually had a lot of volunteers that signed up because.
People think it's cool. They
And the
think it'd be cool.
demographic, and she's talking about the
Church.
casinos,
That's
the
amazing.
demographics are, you know, a 59-year-old woman and up, and they think it's very cool to be a juror. And so that, and then obviously you have so many employees at the casinos that you can pull from them.
But how do you avoid the appearance that, well, you work for us now, so, you know, now you gotta go sit on a jury pool, and if it involves an interest that's against the nation, you know, are they gonna feel compelled to fight in favor of the employer? I mean, that's always something that.
That would be with
Before
anybody.
hire.
isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I never
Yeah,
found
lawyers to
out
lead
when
those
I was
guys in.
arguing in front
Yeah.
of Cherokee Nation employees as jurors.
They hate the nation.
Right, I never felt like they were biased on my side.
The
All
opposite.
contrary. The employment questions, right? Okay.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious, because if we meet with Congress to discuss this issue, when we meet with Congress, who, I'm so sorry, I really wish they were here, they were all invited. So I apologize that we don't have our legislators here.
If we can remember, we have one tribe's little information sign-up sheets. If you want to be a potential juror, we'll put your name, and I'll send that to you. I'll
Please
send
do,
template,
that
right?
would be great, because then when we
Yeah.
meet with them, we can tell them that this is the methodology that was used in other tribes, so we're not trying to reinvent the wheel.
And the AG from Tohono spoke at the fall Indian Law FBA Indian Law Conference in DC a few weeks ago. And that's what I always thought was going to be the most difficult thing about, the Violence Against Women Act is finding jurors. And that's what they've done. And they haven't had any problems at all. They have a big jury pool, and they've worked with their county government too. And just bringing local citizenry, in. So I was very surprised.
Okay, that's encouraging.
And also, so I know there were some Congress members that wanted to meet, but unfortunately, this was the last day of our contract, and so we had to do it today. And I know that they wanted us to meet sometime in December.
We'll come back.
If we need to come back, we'll extend that time for whatever time. We just had to do it today, so.
No, I appreciate you being here and doing this.
Thank you all so much. This has been
Really
great. This
helpful.
has been great.
Well, thank you guys very much. It was nice to see some of you all again and meet some new people. So we gotta get out of here.
We did.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all, thanks.
Okay, just a few closing things. We are required to hand out this agenda, or at least have an agenda, which we did. And we also require people to sign in, so I need you guys to sign in. Okay, if you haven't done it yet, thank you. And if you need to use the facilities, it's through that door, because this one is out.
Danger, yeah.
Yeah, so, this bathroom is out, and the fire alarm doesn't work, and, no, I just tear the building down.
Yes, yes.
We just need to send this building.
Thank you
as
so
a-
much.
Well,